G'day you mob, and welcome back to the Pouch series that I'm doing with my friends Greg and Jake from the podcast called The Pouch, all about Australian politics. In the next part of this series, we're going to be answering your questions related to Australian politics. So guys, it's an advanced English series here where we are talking naturally, but it is a little bit difficult at times as there are three of us all having a bit of a laugh, having a spontaneous conversation, and we talk over the top of each other, so don't get too stressed out. If you don't hear or understand every single word that we say, the whole point is to be a fly on the wall and practice your listening comprehension when multiple native speakers are having a spontaneous conversation, and at the same time, you're going to be learning about Australia and Australian politics. So guys, without any further ado, tap the Karawong and let's get into it. Sort of finishing up, the last little question here is there a political divide in the country? This is from Andres, and I was wondering if you guys could talk a bit about partisanship in this as well, because that seems to be sort of a big characteristic problem, right, with us and our system.
Yeah. Well, I think from my perspective, it comes back to sort of why we started the podcast in the first place, why we started the Pouch, and why and how I started to sort of get a bit more, my interest was more peaked in Australian politics because of our last election, because every poll showed that Labor was meant to win, that the more left-wing party was meant to win, and they didn't win, which means that there is a sense of conservatism here in Australia. I think that you're not really, I suppose, if what do they call it? Like, you know, we don't really have sort of culture wars, or maybe we do, and I don't know about it. And we don't really have a sort of what do they call it? A shutdown culture or cancel culture or something like that.
Not yet.
No, and that's right. That I think
it's
we're
coming.
sort of no, and that's right. I sort of feel like we're getting towards that point where we're going to have those conversations in that cancel culture, and I'm sure it's happened, you know, in covert ways already. So I think that partisanship is occurring, and I have my opinions about why that might be occurring, and I'm sure they're wrong. But anyway, it's mainly got to do with I think that we have had it really good in this country for a very long time, and I think that we still enjoy looking for things that are wrong, but the things that are wrong in this country, you know, they're hard to find. Like, it's really hard to find, and I think they might be a bit misdirected, especially with cancel culture or things like that. We have some really significant problems here in Australia in terms of Indigenous culture and the way that certain groups of Indigenous people are treated, and the access that they have to health and education. I mean, that's a cause worth fighting for.
That man, to pull you up on that, to like sort of flesh it out a bit, it's so difficult, right? Because it feels like the more that you force civilization, Western education onto Indigenous people, it seems like you're sort of undermining their own culture at the same time. So I always feel like I feel like, what do you do in that situation where you're like, well, we want to respect that you have your own culture, your own way of doing everything, but at the same time, make sure you send your kids to school, make sure you go to uni, get a job, make sure that, you know, you vote, do all these things that make you effectively lose your culture in the first place, right? It's so...
Well, I think I think you've hit the nail on the head. I mean, that's essentially, without going too much into it. I suppose, like the angle that I was taking is that they're the sorts of, from my perspective, they're the sorts of social discussions and the social divide that I think is worthy of being fleshed out. Not so much some of the sort of more, surface level sort of stuff. I don't know. I don't want to tread on too many toes, but it's basically, I don't think we have that massive cancel culture, that massive sort of thing happening here, but it is seeping in. And obviously there are people out there, like we've got evidence now that there are people out there who simply don't feel comfortable enough to say, I'm actually a Liberal voter, I'm actually really conservative, I actually really, really like some of the things that the more right in Australia, they're not particularly right wing, have to say, and I align myself with that, but I'm not allowed to say that out in public. I get myself shunned from
the quiet Australians.
The quiet Australians. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Do you think that that's a sort of snowball effect into populism and all of the horrible side of politics when it does get pushed underground and you can no longer talk about problems in the open and have them fleshed out and hear these ideas, right? Is that why we're getting a rise in things like, anti-Semitism in Germany and in Europe and in America at the moment? Because these things just get pushed underground. There's no open talking about ideas anymore. It's anyone who disagrees with me is a Nazi. And so anyone who really is a Nazi or has the potential to become a Nazi just hides until they're made an extremist.
And the other side of that is the many people who have very moderate views. I would call them probably the majority of any country. Of many countries, I would say. I think there are some Eastern European and Western European countries that are perhaps going the other way. But certainly in Australia, we have a great majority of people who sort of sit politically in the centre. Yeah. Maybe traditionally they vote one way or the other, or maybe they just, they maybe socially progressive, but fiscally, economically, etc., they're a little bit more conservative, and thus they vote one way over the other. But there are the masses of the centrists who don't want to debate with the guy who has this fringe view. Why would I want to debate with that guy?
Yeah,
they're crazy.
Yeah.
And as a consequence, they become the quiet Australians, or they become the quiet majority, because while they hold very, without wanting to sound elitist, while they hold pretty sensible, those centrist type of views, you're not right, but I'm not wrong type of views, they probably they don't want to speak up, because not only does it engage them in a conversation that they don't necessarily want to have, because guys, grow up. But on the other, they have been shunned into silence because they've perhaps been in a family environment or in a social environment where their mate Fraser Anning was talking about white nationalism and how great it was and how bad black people were, and they decided, hey buddy, why the hell are you talking about that? And it just so happened that Fraser Anning's best buddy was standing behind him and said, not only is Fraser Anning right, but I hate you and you're the worst person in the world. So, you can get, not only is it politically expedient to keep your views to yourself, but you can be publicly shunned if you don't agree with the loud people as well. So, it's an interesting thing. I hate populism. I think most people hate populism.
But that's one of the most difficult things, because you can never get to the bottom as well, though, with like Australia. You can't get to the bottom of what politicians actually think or believe, because it feels so canned. But they're saying whatever they need to toe the line of the party and make sure they get votes. You never actually hear the real, I wear my heart on my sleeve. Here's what I actually think, because those people, Game of Thrones style, get chucked out of the party pretty quickly.
Well, I also don't necessarily agree with that one. I think that I personally, and this is my honest opinion, I actually think Scott Morrison is very much that person. You watch interviews with him, you watch interviews where he's candid or like he's let cameras into his house and done interviews in his house. Like he talks about love, and he talks about love for his country. He talks about, wanting to do the best that he can for his country, that his parents brought him up to be a giver, to be someone who wants to, commit themselves to public service. I mean, I do believe that as much as he can, he does wear his heart on his sleeve, and he's, like we've seen him get cross at the country, right? We saw him get cross because we all went to the pub, right? We saw him get cross, and everyone said it's like, it was like being told
Stop
off by...
it. Yeah. Stop it. Stop hoarding toilet paper. Stop it.
That's as firm as I'm going to say it. Stop it. I can't say it any firmer than that. And I think
I'm sorry, Dad.
Yeah, well, that's right. And there were people...
It was an I'm sorry, Dad moment. Yeah.
People were saying that's what it was like, and that's exactly what it was like. And I think that that's a good thing. I think that he is a genuinely... he's a genuinely compassionate person, and I think that shows. And he doesn't hold back from actually saying those things, talking about love, talking about those things. I just don't think he does it in a way... He's no Barack Obama. He doesn't he doesn't walk into a room and have a presence.
There's the disconnect, I think, and that was sort of shown in the fires when he went to I've forgotten the name of the town again.
Cabargo.
He went there and was just so disconnected. All right, guys, thank you once again so much for joining me in today's episode. I hope you got a little bit out of this episode and learnt a little bit more about Australia, the Australian political environment, everything like that. And don't forget to go and check out The Pouch, the podcast, where you will be able to listen to episodes released every single week from Jake Farwarton and Greg Savage. These guys are both Australian, and they're very knowledgeable when it comes to all things Australia, but particularly politics. So go and check out the podcast, guys. And until next time, I wish you all the best.